At least 21 civilians in the eastern DRC of Congo have been massacred, and this is according to government sources which blame a militia group called the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF. The massacre on Tuesday in the Rwenzori area of the eastern Beni region is the second in just over a week taking place. Officials say that a week ago 25 civilians were killed on New Year's Eve at the village of Tingwe. The group, which originated in Uganda's northeast in the 1990s, has been attacking and killing civilians in eastern DRC for decades. The illicit exploitation of natural resources continues to be a root cause and a driver of conflict. Most of the militia groups have set aside their political demands and are involved in mineral trafficking. Terror group ISIS has claimed responsibility for many suspected ADF attacks in the past. According to UN figures, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in attacks attributed to the ADF in 2019 and 2020. All right, to give us a little bit more on what's happening and developing in this part of the world, we're now joined by one of our colleagues, Nixon Katembo. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Nixon. This group that call themselves the ADF now have its roots back in the 90s and have been allowed to do this for decades. Take us through why they've been allowed to operate in this way and this escalation in this violence.
Well, Peter, I think for me as a person who understands the region too well, understanding the operation of the ADF, I think let us debunk the myth that this is ADF. I've been in the region, I understand the region too well, its landscape, and I can guarantee you that this is not the normal operation of the ADF as we know it, as it happened in 1996 in Kichwamba, in Kasese district in western Uganda, and the second attack of the ADF that happened on the 26th of October in 1996 at Bwera, on the border of the DRC with Uganda. And that is the ADF that we know. But the current ADF really that is killing the civilian in the DRC is not the ADF that we know. I have argued for quite some time that these are special forces operations. I draw this from my engagement with the military strategists and the military men who are from the region, both confiding to me that these are not normal operations. And unfortunately, to come to the backdrop of the report by the United Nations, a group of experts in the DRC, which is a mid-term report that was published on the 23rd of December 2020, outlining that Rwandan Special Forces have been operating freely in that part of the country, and to my knowledge, these are there is a heavy involvement of Rwanda Special Forces operation in that killings, and the aim is mostly to loot the resources of the DRC and to pit the government against civilians. And therefore, because there has been a long-term projects of causing a situation of South Sudan and Sudan north of the DRC happening in the DRC, and have the eastern DRC secede from the rest of the DRC. But that can only happen if civilians are delinked from the central government. And by killing the civilians, they think that this could be the only way that maybe civilians can just say, no, we are not part of the government is not looking after us, therefore maybe calling for the cessation of the region is far more and will bring stability, which is quite sad. And unfortunately for the DRC and for the civilians there, no one is speaking for them and no one is telling the truth. Instead, the ADF you mentioned are being taken as a caveat to hide the truth of what is happening in that region. I mean, to be frank, the ADF as we know it have been dismantled when the Ugandan army went in there first in 1996 alongside the AFDL of Laurent Kabila, and then the subsequent rebellion that was supported by both Uganda and Rwanda in that particular region of the country. And subsequently, the withdrawal of, the fighting between the Rwandan forces and Ugandan forces in that region, including Sangani, but also not only that, supporting different militias. So if you talk about the ADF, really, I don't think that this is the real factor in the killing of civilians. In fact, the UN group report, of which I've just mentioned, the mid-term report that was published on the 23rd of December last month, saw no link whatsoever between ADF and ISIS, as most of the people claim to be. So let us get completely out of that notion that this is a normal ADF that is killing civilians.
All right, and it's quite a conclusion that you draw that Rwandan Special Forces might be very much involved in this. If that is the case, is it just criminality by soldiers, or could orders be coming from higher up? And if that's the case, where are these resources going?
Of course, the resources are going to neighboring Rwanda, developing that country at the detriment of the security, the social development of the DRC. We shouldn't sugarcoat issues here when we talk about the issues of the region. And unfortunately for some of the media organizations and the many other people do not want to hear this truth, that people who understand the region can talk about quite with the knowledge and experience of what they have seen on the ground. We interact with many people who come from the region. We understand the landscape of the regions. And in fact, to underpin and underscore what I'm saying here is that even when the UN report was published on 23rd of December, it mentions that there are army officers within the DRC army who are former rebel members of the NDC, of rather the M23 and the CNDP of Laurent Nkunda, which were both supported by Rwandan government, harboring Rwandan military units within the DRC and let them operate freely. And I have mentioned before that one of the such army officers in Osagahizi, who is the commander of the 34th Division of the North Kivu regions. So that tells you how the situation is complex, in as much as some of these issues might be hidden behind the ban of the ADF, while actually we know exactly who are perpetrating the violence in that region, including creating various militias, including the support to the NDC Renove led by Gidoshi Mirai Mwisa, and supplying guns and ammunition to continue abating violence in that part of the country.